did you know that the valley of FRANSCHHOEK was initially named FRANSCHHOEK back in the 17th century, mostly because droves of elephants would descend on the valley in spring, using the area as their birthing grounds. FRANSCHHOEK is probably most commonly known for its big, rich, ripe white and red wines made from cultivars like Cabernet Sauvignon, Shiraz, and Chardonnay. But undoubtedly, FRANSCHHOEK's greatest wine treasure is their small collection of very, very old Semillon vines, some of them over 100 years old, that provide fruit for winemakers like Damascene, Ulheit Wines, and the Old Road Wine Company. This gang, along with Boekenhoutkloof, produce some of South Africa's most internationally lauded old vine Semillons. While sadly there may be no more elephants roaming across the FRANSCHHOEK Valley, the inspiration lives on in today's HanDrinksSolo wine of the day, the Haut Espoir Gentle Giant 2017. The wine was made by winemaker Merlot under the watchful eye of the Haut Espoir owner and cellar master Rob Armstrong. Haut Espoir is a small estate situated in the much coveted southern rim of FRANSCHHOEK. It sits within an elevated belt of vineyards on the southern end of the valley, which in my mind produce some of the best bottlings in the entire region. Haut Espoir sits in an elevated position of about 350 to 380 meters above sea level, with most of its vineyards on cooler sites facing either east or southeast. The estate was bought by the Armstrong family back in 1999 with a view to make high quality wines that lent into FRANSCHHOEK's reputation for big, rich wines. It was then in about 2011 that Rob and his wife Erica began shifting the process from conventional viticulture to biodynamic viticulture. But very sadly, Rob passed away in 2021, just as the farm was beginning to benefit from all the fruits of his very hard labor. So while it's true that the name of this wine, Gentle Giant, does indeed reference the elephants that once roamed the valley, Erica Armstrong informs me reliably that Rob himself, the gentle giant of a man that he was indeed the original inspiration for the name behind this wine. True to his humble nature, he often shied away from the idea of having a wine that referenced him directly. But in his absence, the wine has become a tribute to a man who not only was a pioneer in the sphere of biodynamics, but also in the Valley of FRANSCHHOEK's important wine scene. As we mentioned earlier, FRANSCHHOEK is a region that's known for its big, rich, ripe wines made from cultivars like Cabernet Sauvignon, Shiraz, and Chardonnay. Although, truth be told, there is as much Sauvignon Blanc in the valley as any of the other three cultivars that I just mentioned. Keeping all this in mind and noting that the Gentle Giant really is a wine that leads into that nature of big, rich reds, featuring cultivars like Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, and Shiraz, we'll be very surprised to note that when we get into the glass, this wine is anything but big or brash. Now, when we give this guy a sniff, what we get is a combination of aromas that features stewed fruit and leather and cocoa dust, but then slightly fresher elements of blackcurrant as well. And then if you get time and sniff the glass once it's empty, it's really interesting to note how there's even a raspberry sherbet note that emerges. Now, of course, the red and black fruit combination is a delight in itself, but things get even better when you notice the texture. It is pure silk. And one might ask, how is this possible? A big, rich, ripe wine made with high tannin cultivars? One needs to look at how the wine is made in order to make sense of what you're tasting. The first thing we need to remember is that the fruit for this wine was harvested in 2017, which means regardless of how the wine was made, it has had plenty of time in bottle for those tannins to polymerize and silken up. But it may interest you to further note that this wine was left in oak for a massive 30 months. Now, any accountant in the wine industry would be tearing their eyes out at the thought of a 3-year cash cycle. But as the story goes, this was just something that Rob Armstrong decided on very early on. It was a style that could only be achieved with very long old oak maturation. And so regardless of the cost of producing the wine, the style was always more important to him than the bottom line. And perhaps it was also this approach to accounting that enabled him to so fearlessly embrace biodynamic viticulture. Now, pondering those 30 months in oak, one might ask, but surely the oak would dramatically overpower the fruit, leading to a wine that lacks any sense of balance. In response to this, the first point to note here is that all of the oak barrels were 4th fill or older, which means that most of the work being done by the oak had less to do with imparting lactones or vanillins and more to do with micro-oxygenation. What this slow oxidation does, ironically, is make the wine more stable in the long term. It also gives space for those oxidative compounds to develop in the wine, those notes of stewed fruit and slightly more salty, savory elements. The second thing to note about oak regimens in wine is that it would seem that the relationship between the amount of time a wine spends in oak and the impact that that oak has on wine is by no means a straight line directly proportional graph. Instead, it would seem that the harmony or clash between oak and wine ebbs and flows as we pass through time. For example, a winemaker may taste a wine that has been in a barrel for 12 months or even 18 months, and he may be horrified at how overt and dominating the oak is in the mix. Counterintuitively though, his response to this problem may be to allow the wine to sit in that barrel for another 6 months in order to allow time for further integration. But no doubt, this is definitely a topic that we need to visit in a video of its own on another day, because that is all we have time for today. But if you do have some questions that you want answered sooner, then leave a comment on the website and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Also, if you enjoyed the video, then support us on Patreon and subscribe to the HanDrinksSolo YouTube channel, where we publish at least 6 videos each month talking about wine science, wine history, unusual cultivars, and some of the rising winemaking stars coming out of the dynamic South African wine boom.